Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. We'll be starting in about 5 minutes. Before we start, we'd love for you to do two things for us. One is that our presenter today, David, would like you to participate in a social experiment, and we would love for you or invite you to send a short message to a family member or a friend with whom you have not contacted or connected to in the last 2 weeks. Secondly, we would also invite you to log on to menti.com and input the code 955832. So if we could invite you to do those two small things for us, it would be greatly appreciated. And we'll be talking to you very soon in about 5 minutes. Thank you. Hello and welcome again. For those that have just joined us, you can see up on the screen that we would like to invite you to do two things for us just before we start. One is would like you to participate in a social experiment that our presenter David would like you to do, and that is to send a short message or email to a family friend, a family member or a colleague with whom you have not connected to in the last 2 weeks. And secondly, we would love for you to participate in our menti.com engagement activity by going to menti.com and entering the code you see on your screen. Thank you. We'll be starting very shortly. We're just waiting for a few more people to log on. Hello everybody, Ramadan Kareem and a warm virtual welcome to you all. My name is Nada Salha and I'll be facilitating today's webinar along with my awesome colleagues Maya and Magnus. I would like to start off by expressing heartfelt thanks to each and every one of our awesome teachers and leaders and educators online with us today. You have transformed the way that you teach young students in Dubai in such a short period of time. So thank you so much, and thank you again for joining us for this webinar today. I would like to start off by engaging with you in a menti.com survey. So if you don't mind, if you have not logged on already, please go to menti.com and I'll bring that up on the screen for you shortly. So please go to menti.com and enter the code you see on your screen there. 95 58 32. So I'd like to ask you now, in 5 years' time, I think schooling and education will look significantly better, slightly better, largely unchanged, slightly worse, significantly worse. So please just choose one of those options and let's see how we as a collective feel about the future of education. And as people do that, I'd just like to share with you, we have around 100 people online with us today, which is fantastic. So welcome to all of you today. Most of the people online with us today are teachers, about 50% are teachers, 20% are people from senior leadership teams, and the remaining people include teaching assistants, governing board members, and members of inclusion and wellbeing teams. So again, welcome. Wow, you can see a lot of optimism there, with a lot of people feeling that it will be significantly better. I guess the use of technology has made us more tech savvy, and maybe that will make us more efficient in our work in the future. Perhaps this is the time where changes are made to how we assess students in their learning. Perhaps we're very optimistic that we will have grown out of all of this and become much stronger. Thank you very much, everybody. So let me just rewind briefly back to 2012, when a movement known as What Works began and would come to change the culture of education in Dubai. It was a series of events that were anchored in a strength-based approach and was focused on collaboration. So What Works X, which is where we are now, this fantastic platform, is pretty much the same concept. It's just the platform has changed. And hopefully with the support of technology, even more and more teachers will be able to participate and engage in these collaborative events. So today's webinar is about you, our teachers, and one of my favorite speakers is back to What Works. David Bott will be providing a 20-minute presentation that speaks to the topic of well-being. And I'll just bring up my slides again. Just bear with me for a moment. Okay, and so, sorry. Still getting used to the technology. So David will be providing a 20-minute presentation that speaks to how to foster a sense of calm during distance learning, and we will learn what the CALM refers to during David's presentation. Following his presentation, you will have the opportunity for Q&A discussion with David, and that will include questions that have been submitted during the registration process and some live questions from our audience. And finally, a closing few statements by myself, and we would love to hear your feedback using Mentimeter at the end of this webinar as well. Now, as much as we'd love to hear your voices, your mics have been muted for this webinar. However, please do ask questions throughout the presentation by submitting them in the chat Q&A feature to the right of your screen, and ensuring that your questions are on topic. The Q&A discussion will be facilitated by my fantastic colleague Magnus, who will now introduce David. Over to you, Magnus.
Thank you, Nana. Thank you so much. Okay, it is now my pleasure to introduce our presenter, David Bott. David Bott is the Associate Director for the Institute of Positive Education at Geelong Grammar School in Melbourne, Australia. Since 2013, David leads one of the world's most experienced teams dedicated to research, development, and training in the field of positive education. David also ensures the delivery of a positive education curriculum across the Geelong Grammar School's primary and secondary campuses. David regularly consults with some of the world's leading schools to help guide well-being visions and strategies. David has also been involved in training thousands of teachers in designing, implementing, and sustaining individual and whole school approaches to well-being. An inspiring educator, both in and out of the classroom, David is passionate about highlighting the impact of positive relationships between teachers and students. The Institute of Positive Education that David leads is an initiative by Geelong Grammar School aimed at improving student well-being. And David has been kind enough to put together a presentation for us, which responds to the theme of how to stay calm, abbreviated CALM. C standing for connection, A for acceptance, L for learn, and M for me during this distance learning period. Seemingly overnight, the world changed. Teachers and school leaders have had to revamp their entire instructional systems within many instances only in a matter of weeks. To say many of us experienced whiplash, disorientation, and anxiety in the first few weeks is, I'm sure, an understatement. Our students are feeling it too. It's probable that during a pandemic that heavily impacts everyday life, levels of anxiety in children and teens are even higher. Same goes for teachers, and the possibility of subsequent trauma greater. In these unprecedented times, most teachers are rising to the occasion collectively and quickly shifted or have shifted to remote learning and adopted routines with determination, positivity, and grit, despite feelings of uncertainty at times. So on behalf of all of us, I'd like to hand over the word to David for his presentation on how to stay calm. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Magnus. Appreciate that. And you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Loud and clear. Thanks, David.
Good on you. Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction, both Nada and Magnus. And thank you so much to you guys who are over there in Dubai joining us today. Well, I was going to say tonight. It's currently I'm sitting in Melbourne, Australia here. It's 10:15 in the evening in our autumn time. It's been raining and cold here, but I'm in a nice warm studio and lovely to be with you today. And partly because I'm excited to share a little bit about what we've learned over the last 6 weeks, but also in part because a big part of I feel like I'm almost half kind of Dubaianese. That's a ridiculous word, but Dubai is in my DNA as well. I have spent a significant amount of time there in the last few years and lived there for 4 months with my family last year. Know the education system well, know the amazing work that KHDA are doing and that schools are doing there, and it is such a dynamic, exciting education environment in Dubai. I love it. So it's very close to my heart, and so is teaching. You know, I am literally sitting in a little studio inside Geelong Grammar School right now, and having been sat in a school for the last 6 weeks and seeing the chaos kind of unfold has been really sobering, because this is a profession that I love, that we love, and it's fractured at the moment, and it's challenging, and it's exciting, and it's amazing, and people are unwell and people are inspired. It's an incredible kind of time to be alive, I think, but also to be in education at the moment. So I'm excited to share the next little session with you. Hopefully you find this interesting. We've tried to simplify things as much as possible to keep it as kind of evidence-based, science-informed, but also practical. As part of my role, I speak with leading educators from around the world all the time, and we're just trying to bring together the simplest, most effective ways to think about things at the moment, but also to continue to move our profession forward and our pedagogy forward. So I'll begin in a moment. I also wanted to just acknowledge that whilst I hope this is quite uplifting and inspiring in some ways and interesting for you, wanted to acknowledge that I appreciate that all of us are being touched in different ways by this situation at the moment, and just wanted to acknowledge, recognise the people that are most affected by the worst parts of this situation at the moment. So I hope you are all okay. I hope your families are all okay, and we're certainly thinking of those people who are suffering a little bit at the moment. Magnus, I appreciate your introduction. I have to say, though, you made one big mistake, and the title of this, you misspelt calm, actually. I think you spelt it C-A-L-M, but actually, it's actually spelled K-O-A-L-A, koala. See, this is my my little calm today. Usually I travel with these guys normally, but this is the one that my little daughter's been cuddling at the moment. It's trying to give me a bit of a sense of calm, but hopefully that'll sit there nicely and just keep us on track, maybe help keep time as well as we go through the next little bit of time together. So this is me. I'm David Bott. I'm the Associate Director of the Institute of Positive Education. I've studied psychology and teaching. It's been my whole career for the last 20 years. First 15 years of my career I spent teaching in classrooms, teaching A-level psychology, mostly in Australian psychology. I taught in 3 different countries. Most recently I was head of psychology here at Geelong Grammar School, then head of positive education. And now I help lead, as Magnus said, this Institute of Positive Education. It is a research and training institute helping governments and schools around the world. They have been involved in the IPEN Advisory Board, which is the International Positive Education Network, and also sit on the Dubai Future Council. But that's really, that little picture there you see now is really who I am. That's me at home a couple of weeks ago with my little nearly 5-year-old son Hudson. He turns 5 in a couple of weeks, and my little 2-year-old daughter as well. So that's me, but you haven't really come to learn about me. You've come to hear a little bit about this concept of calm, and calmness is so crucial to who we are as humans, right? I think when we are at our best, we are calm. Like when we are at our best as humans, we're immersed in the experience of life. We're connected with people. You know, the opposite of calm is panic, right? Or it's this kind of uncalm, this sense of panic where we're disconnected from the best parts of life and kind of caught up in the chaos of our mental thinking or in unhelpful thinking. And nobody, I don't think across the history of time, has ever looked back on a situation and said, I wish I'd panicked more. You know, that I wish I'd rushed into things and been unthinking in the situation. We don't think that way. You know, it's calmness allows us to be at our optimal, allows us to perform at our best, regardless of the situation. And that's true whether you're an elite sports performer or whether you're an 8th grade kid in an English lesson or an Arabic lesson or psychology, whatever it is. You know, this is whether you're a child or an adult, being calm means that we are connected with the world and connected with the best parts of ourselves. Unfortunately, at the moment, a lot of us are uncalm. All of us, I think, to be honest. You know, I think this situation is hugely challenging, as we all know. And I think at the moment, there is this really kind of profound sense of uncalm. And the reason for that, and we have, you know, 30 years of science now that helps us appreciate the factors that contribute to panic or fear. And really it can be, the psychology of this whole field can be summed up here in this little equation, which is uncertainty plus anxiety equals fear. And fear is made up of those 2 parts. You know, we all appreciate what it's like to have uncertainty without anxiety. Uncertainty without anxiety can be excitement or curiosity. But it's only when we add uncertainty plus anxiety that we get this very negative valenced emotion, this negative kind of experience of fear. We can also have anxiety by itself with certainty. And if you have anxiety plus certainty, that can just be kind of jitters or butterflies or whatever. But it's really when we combine this sense of not knowing what the future holds, plus this kind of very heightened arousal, that we get this fear emotion. And fear is a very natural, normal, healthy emotion designed to help us escape from significant pending or imminent danger, right? It's without fear, we die pretty quickly as a human. Fear is probably, no, it is the most important emotion we have, because without fear, you would walk out onto Sheikh Zayed Road and just, not that you can in most places, but if you could walk just straight onto Sheikh Zayed Road, you would see a car or a bus or an Uber coming straight at you, and you would just keep walking and you'd be hit by the Uber and you die, because you wouldn't experience any intense emotional response to that imminent danger. So fear literally keeps us alive. It is the most important emotion, but it becomes problematic when it's prolonged and when there's this overarching sense of uncertainty, that there is no end to this. We don't even know what's causing this kind of fear. It's just this kind of prevalent experience of uncertainty combined with anxiety. And so it's those two combined which give us this sense of uncalm that we're all experiencing at the moment. And as you know, this presentation is kind of based on an acronym CALM. And so if you work with me through this kind of acronym at the start here, we're going to go with, instead of anxiety, if we switch that to nervousness, we get this for uncalm, right? Anxiety and nervousness. So that's not a state we want to be in. It's certainly not a state we want to be in for long. And it certainly doesn't serve us well to be in that state. And it doesn't serve our students or our families or our colleagues at all. So whilst we have to acknowledge that this is a very difficult situation, we also appreciate that there are ways that we can mitigate that. There are ways that we can kind of try and address either that uncertainty or that nervousness. And if we can just reduce those a little bit, then we start to become more and more calm and approach this calm state. So let me go through these 4 very brief approaches that are kind of summarising science and summarising 10 years of experience that our teams had in working with educators on the ground, often in very difficult situations. The first is C for connect. And what we know about humans is that we're a hive species, right? We are wired to connect. Connection is such a pivotal part of how we experience the world. And one of the cool things about human connection is that, and this really leverages Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's work out of the University of North Carolina. One of the cool things about human connection, especially deep, powerful relationships, is that they're built not often by massive events in our lives, but usually they're built just by ongoing small micro moments of interaction that we have with people. Fredrickson talks about connection as being really the ultimate source of resilience. That when we're struggling, when we have when we need some support, or when we're challenged by our environment or a social situation, whatever, the more connections we have at our disposal, the more resource we have to draw upon to support us through that, right? So connection really is the source of our resilience as a human, our source of being able to get through challenge and difficulty. And so connection is so fundamental. But one of the really cool things is that it doesn't take a big event. Like, connection is built over time, over small micro moments, small interactions. And what we're seeing at the moment in this really challenging situation is that it's really these tiny, deliberate acts of connection that are being so important, that are so important right now, because the large acts of connection are impossible. People can't fly home and give their mums and dads hugs because they're not allowed to get on a plane. We're deprived of large acts of connection. We can't go, a cousin of mine just about to have a baby, and I'm not going to be able to see the new member of our family. We've got people being married and all sorts of situations where we can't have big acts of connection, but it's these deliberate acts of small connection that we're seeing having a huge impact both at our school and at schools around the world. And we've sort of taken this concept of acts of kindness and kind of these little things that we try and do in schools automatically and anyway in a normal situation in schooling, but to really focus us on connection for the moment. So these intentional, deliberate acts of connection can be small and really just as small as sending a text or an email. And that's why I wanted you at the start of this workshop to just send a very small message of hello. And I wonder how many of you did that. I wonder how many of you were able to send a little short message or an email to a person you haven't connected with for a while. And the question I wanted to ask, and I won't be able to get any direct feedback now, but is how many of you got a response back from that tiny little connection that you made? What we're seeing in the neuroscience research around connection as well is that it only takes a tiny little connection like that, a little hello, even just an eye contact or a wave of the hand or just body gestures, whatever it is, just these small moments of contact significantly shift what happens in our brain in terms of neurochemistry and reshapes the way we think about other people and can create strong bonds. So I'd really encourage us to really look around us, the people around us, and continue to work on these deliberate acts of connection. Reach out to people, say hi, use eye contact, deliberately go the long way around your school so you don't bump into people during social distancing, but so you kind of can say hi to people and connect, because we need each other right now. The A in calm is for accept. And this is really hard, and it's the most challenging part, I think, of what we're going through, because as educators, we we choose this profession in part because we want to have impact. We want to have influence, like we want to have control on guiding the lives of children, and we can't at the moment. A lot of that's being impacted, and this has a pretty big, this has an impact on us, on our ability to feel that we're efficacious, that we can have impact, that we have, that what we're doing matters, or it makes sense, and we've kind of lost that. And so there's this real tendency to struggle, right, to fight against that, to try and retain control where it's impossible, where in fact the best approach right now is to accept what we can't change and to really focus on the small things that are within our control. And when we do that, we develop more a sense of certainty, right? That uncertainty we talked about in terms of fear. When we start to take control of the little things that we can control, certainty comes back. And also anxiety gets reduced because we're able to achieve small little successful things in our life, in our realm of control, right? And so really this is about accepting. And the serenity prayer, which you may have come across, says it so beautifully: grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. In this erratic, kind of volatile world we're in, we need to be prepared to accept there are big things way outside of our control. And there's so much that is in our control, like the way we show up to work, like the way we greet our parents, like the way we pick up a phone, text a friend. So much of our life is still in control. And it's when we focus on those that we get more certainty, less anxiety, and more calm. So the reflection here is, today, can you remind yourself what's not in my control? What's not? What is something that maybe I can just let go? Because we have such limited energy, such limited time in the day, that fighting those things that are out of our control isn't worthwhile. And remind ourselves what is in my control. You're going to make, depending on which research you look at, you're going to make between 70 and 20,000 decisions a day. Depends on how you kind of calculate decisions. But today, you're going to make between 70 and 20,000 decisions today. Some unconscious, some very important. How many of those are ones that are directed to maintaining things that are in your control? How much of that energy is directed to working towards small things that are in your control? Here's the L, and the L is for learn. And this is really about maintaining an open mind. This is about recognizing that humans, yes, we are a hive species, but we're also a learning species. Humans are born pathetic. We are born with pretty much zero skills. We have so little instinctive behaviors as a human. Like when a human's born, all it can do is poo and cry, really. And all of the rest of our behaviors are learned, right? From the day we're born tabula rasa, blank slate. And the way that we've been designed as a species is from the very first day, we're designed to learn our environment, to learn our social environment, to learn language, to learn to what we are a learning species. We're designed to thrive in incredibly difficult situations. Even from an evolutionary perspective, on the African savanna lands where humans are evolving, growing and morphing and changing, we were starving. Our ancestors were literally starving on the plains of Africa, and yet we survived. All of that is encoded in our DNA. We are a learning species that is designed to learn and thrive in challenge. And when we remain open to that possibility that, yeah, this is horrible, this situation in many ways. And yeah, it's horrible not being at school, and I miss my kids, I miss the friends, and I miss being able to hug my mum and dad. And there are amazing possibilities here. And I know I will get through this. And I have an incredible brain, an incredible software DNA program in my mind that enables me to thrive, to get through challenge. When we remain open, we see possibilities, right? So this is about remaining optimistic. And so I loved that. I think 80% of you on that poll at the start felt that education, schooling in 5 years' time is going to be in a significantly better place than we are now because of what we're experiencing with this pandemic. This pandemic sucks at times. There's really awful parts about it. And we're learning about possibilities. Like schools are changing at a pace that we thought was impossible, where status quo is being shattered, and we're looking at the possibilities of where education can go. And that's amazing if we remain open to acknowledging that we can learn. This is partly about a growth mindset, being open, knowing that we're an ever-evolving kind of work of art as a human that will learn and will grow, and the others around us will as well. So what are the opportunities for my learning and growth today? This is a wonderful way to start the day, or even in really challenging times, to be able to just sit back, to accept that there are some things that are challenging and to look for opportunities to grow. When we do that, we also find opportunities for certainty. We reduce, remember back to the fear is about uncertainty and anxiety. When we look for opportunities to grow, things become more certain rather than looking at things that are missing or lacking, right? And we reduce anxiety when we seek to learn, right? When we become engaged in learning. And so here's the other little question you might want to think about is, how can I support others to learn and grow today? And finally, the M is for me. And this is really recognizing that we need each other right now. In schools, everyone is struggling. Our head of school here, Rebecca Cody, is one of the best heads of school I've seen anywhere in the world, a brilliant educator, and by her own admission, really struggling in many ways. Like, it's hard. Like, leadership in school is having to be so reactive. It's a changing environment all the time. It's incredibly stressful. We need each other. And we have to be prepared to lean on each other, but that requires looking after ourselves as well. And I think teaching is such a profession that's based so much on caring for others, on empathy, on this empathic, compassionate outpouring, that sometimes we forget that we've got to look after ourselves as well. And so this is a reminder from the science about self-compassion, about kindness, about resetting of possibilities, resetting of standards, being prepared to acknowledge that things may not be up to your normal standards, that's okay. To be kind and compassionate to others, and to be equally kind and compassionate to yourself. And it's also about this question of, when I spoke about control earlier, we have control every day as to who we are in this situation. Asking yourself the question, in spite of all of this that around us is happening, who do I want to be? Who am I going to be in spite of this? When I turn up to my fourth Zoom lesson for the day and I'm tired and exhausted, and my students are sick of being on Zoom, and I have the opportunity to greet my students on the computer on Zoom late in the day, who do I want to be in that situation? And despite everything that's happening around us, we have that choice. Who do I want to be in this situation? So this me is about compassion and about choice that you have. And when we think about ourselves in that way, we look after ourselves, we eat better, we sleep better, we take care of ourselves, we exercise. And please exercise. Haven't got time today to talk about the research we're seeing about exercise during this pandemic, but exercise, double down on your exercise. When we take care of ourselves, we're better able to take care of others, and we're better able to show up as the best version of ourselves for our students and for our colleagues and for others as well. So the reflection here is, how can I care for myself today in order to care for others, in order to be the best version of myself for my students, my family, my colleagues. So just reflecting on where we began here, we began this session talking about fear, uncalmness, which is a combination of uncertainty and nervousness. And the alternative is calm. And what we're seeing, again, from the science, from studies that are being done currently from schools around the world, is that when we connect with others, when we accept what we can't change and focus on what we can, when we have this learning spirit, this open mind, when we focus on ourselves in order to support others, when we choose to turn up into as a version that we're proud of each day, then we get this sense of calm. Because all of those things, connection, acceptance, learning, compassion for self, they are a hostile environment for uncertainty. Uncertainty can't exist when we're connected and when we accept and when we have this open mindset, when we care for ourselves. And nervousness can't exist when we do those things. Calm, connect, accept, learn, me. This is about creating an environment where we can be our best and creating a hostile environment for uncertainty and nervousness, which enables us to be calm, enables us to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. And so that's the end of the presentation. I hope you found something of interest there. I hope something resonated with you. I hope there may be a little ideas or strategies or tactics you might have picked up. But I'm very happy to answer a few questions. And I just wanted, before we do, let me say again, thank you so much for all of you for being here, for giving up your precious time, especially when there's so much happening. And thank you so much for all the work you're doing, supporting schools and supporting your students during this such difficult time. I know what that feels like, and it's amazing the work you do. And so grateful to everyone in the education profession. But thank you guys. So hand back to you.
Thank you so much, David. What an inspiration. What an inspiring presentation. Very informative. We're now going to move on to the question and answer bit of this webinar. So in the registration forms that you've all filled out prior to this webinar, many of you have submitted questions that I'd like to pose to David. And I also want to remind you all to, if you have any questions during this webinar, please to post them in the live feature on your right-hand side of your screen. But let's kick off with the first question for David. Enjoying the small things. People always say, enjoy the small things in life. For example, take a bubble bath in the middle of the day just because you can. David, what are your thoughts around that? What is the significance of this act on your well-being?
Yeah, thanks, Magnus. I think it's a great question. I think in part that's very much aligned with the M in calm, which was for me, which is about being aware of what it is that re-energizes you, because we need to be doing that. You know, we have to, it's our obligation as a human, as a parent, perhaps as a teacher, to re-energize, to do everything we can to recharge our batteries, because we can't be a good father or a good friend or a good teacher unless we're looking after ourselves. So I think those small things are absolutely pertinent. But I also think it's to do with the small acts of connection as well, you know, so it relates to the C in connect as well. I think, you know, one way we think about our lives, or whether we're living a flourishing life, is really that we're going to make 70 to 20,000, depends on how you measure, decisions each day. But Shin Iyengar from Columbia University is a Canadian researcher whose research we really like, says that we make, a piece of research she did recently found that we make on average 70 important decisions each day that kind of are fork in the road decisions in our lives, in some small way. And they're small, like each one of those is small, but each one impacts our life directly. And I think when we're making those small decisions that are informed by calmness, they're informed by our values, you know, that are directed to caring for ourselves and others, then ultimately life is made up of a million small things, right? And so I think at these times where the world is so unsettled and disrupted, we can sometimes go looking for the big solutions or the big ways to solve our problems, or we feel we have to go and buy a brand new mountain bike to go and climb the biggest. But often it's really just the small things. It's it's the combination of all of those small connections, the small choices we make when they're aligned with our values, when they're about other people, when they're about nurturing ourselves so that we can nurture others. Then we end up being this great big awesome version of ourselves. Is really a culmination of small things. So I really do encourage people to think small, particularly at the moment. Look for small successes, for small wins, for small ways to control small things, and they all build up.
Yeah, thank you, David. On to the next question. Giving students a sense of control. One of the most terrifying aspects of this pandemic is that it's out of our control. Typically, people have a baseline belief that bad things like a car crash are unlikely to happen to them, which stops us from being in a constant state of anxiety. When a crisis affects us all, we can feel that any bad thing is now possible and experience catastrophic thinking like, oh my God, everyone I love could die. So what are some of your ways in which teachers can empower students?
Yeah. So I think really an important way to think about calmness, apart from the CALM or kind of my presentation, I think the way that we're starting to understand what calmness really is, really it comes down to two things, and that is perspective, first of all, that we see whether you're a world leader or whether you're a teacher or whether you're a 6-year-old child. Calmness really comes down to perspective and our ability to regulate our reaction to strong emotions, right? So I think what we're seeing in the way we're trying to work with students directly is on those two angles at the same time. One is around perspective, right? This is this is a big thing that's happening, right? The world economy's come to a grinding halt. You know, so much of what we know is gone temporarily, or some of it permanently, right? So we're experiencing loss. This is a huge sense of grief we're experiencing. It's a big thing. And at the same time, most of us are okay. And that we're a learning species, and our ancestors have gone through way worse than this. And there are many things that's still in our control, and and the list goes on. That really, this is about teaching perspective to our students, but also to our colleagues, ourselves. You know, perspective isn't inherent in humans. Perspective is really a form of wisdom that is learned, and you have to be calm. You have to be able to create perspective. And we all know in colleagues that we have, you know, if you can bring to mind a colleague who always seems to be calm, or a leader that's always calm, you know, it's first and foremost about they're able to keep perspective. Whilst everyone else is running around losing their heads, they're able to see the bigger picture. But that's a teachable skill, and that requires work. And so I think I encourage people to think about that concept, but also to teach that explicitly to students, you know, the concept of perspective, but then also about regulating big emotions like fear. And you can do that by breaking down fear into its constituent elements, or practicing mindfulness or meditation, using physiological versions of that, or going for a run, or eating healthy, sleeping well. You know, so I think when we're able to appreciate, to label these big, ugly, negative emotions, to know that they're there, to work on ways to regulate them, but also to create perspective. They're the two angles we're taking with students and with educators and with leaders that we're working with around the world to really think about things right now in this difficult time.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Phrase change, social distancing to physical distancing. What are your thoughts around the phrase shift that is being popularized at the moment? We know from Australia, for instance, that they're seeing a value in changing it from calling it social distancing into physical distancing. Socially, it is more important than ever that we stay connected and not distant.
Yeah, that's I think I've got a colleague of mine, Dana Kerford from You Are Strong, who I was speaking with the other day, who said it this way. She said that the world learned a lesson, a big lesson about language when we made the mistake of calling it social distancing. And it didn't take long for people in education to really rile against that. That jars against the core of what we do as a profession. Social distancing is exactly the opposite of not only what we do, but what we need to be doing more of at the moment. It's the last thing we need to be doing. Social distancing is devastating in so many ways. What we need to be doing is physical distancing, you know, spatial distancing, call it what you will, but we need to be coming together in terms of socialization, doing everything we can to socially connect. So I think the world learned a lesson there, and you know, you could argue it's just pedantic semantics or whatever, but actually it's really important. I think particularly for young children who don't have the sophistication of language, and so they hear these things and they kind of don't have the capacity to think outside of the concrete terms sometimes, or think laterally. And obviously when we hear, you know, a president or a premier, whoever it is, a prime minister talk about social distancing, of course we don't think they mean, you know, we're able to recognize they don't mean don't talk to anyone. But children are much more literal. Language, you know, humans think in language anyway, but particularly young children or teenagers even. I'm not sure I understand. Have Siri contributing. Language is so crucial, and so we're really at the moment really trying to be very careful with language that we're using, particularly around emotional language. We're really trying to teach this kind of concept of emotional literacy at an accelerated rate at the moment because of the negative emotions we're feeling, enhancing negative emotions, and also being careful with language about the future moving forward, this optimistic kind of mindset that we're trying to develop, acknowledging that it's difficult, students are struggling, we're obviously acknowledging that, and we're trying to maintain this hopeful, optimistic, forward-thinking, future-oriented mindset. So even the concept, which we're trying to shift, the next thing you need to help me shift, Magnus, is the concept of going back to school. We keep hearing in Australia, governments around the world going, we're never going to go back to school. We're going to go forward to school. Schools are changed forever. You know, it's going to be different, and that's exciting. We need to think about going forward to school. You know, that this is we're not returning to this historical, the world's different. If we say that the world's different, we're hankering for something of the past that we're going to go back to, that's unhelpful. Like, I think our language needs to be about a future orientation, about moving forward, about thinking about what can we do, what's in our control. So this language is crucially important for us at the moment.
Thank you, David. Thank you. This touches upon my next question. Yeah, I wanted to talk about what lasting impact will all of this disruption have on us once we come back to school. What do you think are the sort of the key messages here to take on now for planning for the future?
Yeah, I think thanks. It's a great question. I think well, the honest answer is no one knows exactly. Mm-hmm. But what we do know is that we've glimpsed the future. I think so much of the way we do schooling and education is directed or is caused by historical artifact. That most, Geelong Grammar School I'm in now, lessons begin at 8:30 in the morning. And the reason for that is because they began at 8:30 last year and the year before. There's no real scientific or any other reason for that, or educative reason. It's just historical artifacts, right? So I think what we've seen is the possibility when we break down the status quo that we can start asking questions about what is possible, like what does the future of education really look like? So the honest answer is I don't know, Magnus. I don't know exactly how education is going to change, other than to say, I think we're starting to see some very exciting possibilities that are challenging this foundational infrastructure of schooling in a really exciting way. Can I say the last thing I want to say, Magnus, is that I think what we're learning is that like the contagion of emotion, like the impact of emotion on education. I think we've seen that in a real petri dish example at the moment with this kind of pandemic. The impact of social emotional learning, how important that is, the impact of emotions on our experience. And kind of what we're seeing is that anxiety is super contagious and kind of has this negative impact. But equally so is calmness, and so is kindness, and so is empathy and compassion. That emotions are such a powerful foundational way, part of who we are as humans, and that's why education around social emotional learning, positive education, wellbeing science is so crucial in my mind. But also how we can leverage this to help us during these difficult times. So anxiety, yeah, it's contagious, but so is kindness, and so is calmness.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Beautiful way of ending this Q&A. I'm now going to hand over to Nada for her mentee.
I'm here, but just trying to get the screen up. And as the screen comes up, I'll keep the video on you, Magnus. No. Okay, I think it's working now. So just huge heartfelt thanks to David. You can hear them right now, David, just clapping for you. You can just hear the loud cheers. So thank you so very, very much. We hope that was useful to everyone that's been on the call, and we had around 130 people online with us today, which is just a fantastic number. As I said, we hope it was useful and that it has given you greater perspective and hopefully choosing calm a lot more often over anxiety. And thanks, David, for helping us to build our calm capability within all of us. I'm just mindful of the time. I know we have about 10 minutes. If you can stay on a little bit longer, just a couple more minutes, I'd like to invite you to participate in our feedback session using menti.com. And hopefully...
I'm still live now, just so you know.
Oh, okay. No, should definitely, okay. Has the new slide come up, Magnus?
Yep, it has.
Okay, great. So may I invite you all now to go back to your menti.com. And just the first question is up there. Overall, how satisfied were you with the quality of the content of the webinar, the structure, the presenter and his preparedness in responding to questions? So appreciate if you could answer those questions for me now. We almost need some background music when we're answering these questions. Okay, I'll just wait a couple more minutes to get some feedback. Thank you so much to everyone. We'll just move on to our next Menti.com question. We've learned a lot from David's webinar, so I'd like to ask you now, what will be the first thing you plan to do to empower yourself and others to foster a sense of calm? So what are the deliberate acts of connection for the C will you do after today? Will you be sending more short messages more often? For accept, the A in calm, what will you accept that you cannot change? As David said, the big things at the moment are out of our control, but there are so many other smaller things, and no matter how small they are, you have the possibility of controlling those small things and accepting, and that really gives us a sense of calm. And for the L in calm, learn. What are the opportunities for learning? How can you support others? And for the M in me, for the M in calm, which stands for me, it's about recognizing we do need each other. In spite of all of this, what sort of person do you want to be? And this is really about self-compassion. How will you care better for yourself? Fantastic, a lot of reflection coming through on the screen, as you can see. So being kind to everyone and taking care of myself. Keep the connection going with family and friends. I will try to think of things I can control and less of what I cannot. Give 30 minutes a day for myself. Breathing exercises. Looking for small wins around me. Absolutely. Appreciating the simple joys, staying connected, call up my friends in alphabetical order. Oh, I love that one. That's a great one. Literally staying calm. Follow what Mr. David said. Fear is contagious and so is calm. That's a brilliant takeaway. Thank you for sharing that. Change myself and my attitude. Take a deep breath and realize there is still so much more in my control. Reach out to people who are in need. Following on what David said, I'll be reaching out more often to staff and students. Send happy vibes. incorporate the elements of calm, accept the challenges of distance learning, explore the new alternatives to learning. Absolutely. Oh, well, this is brilliant. We have almost 100 ideas that people will pursue after this seminar, after this webinar. Well, thanks to David. Thank you so much, David, for that. I'm glad to see that there's words such as being compassionate of myself, staying fit and healthy, caring for myself, giving time for myself. Well-being starts with you. Thank you so much, everybody. That's fantastic. I'll just move on now to the next question. Oh, there's no more questions. Well, there you go. So we're almost done, but just before we go, I'd like to bring your attention to the In This Together dubai.khda.gov.ae website that KHDA has put together, and basically it is a repository of free online resources to support teachers, educators and students during the distance learning period. You will also find on this site a link to resources from David's school, from the Institute of Positive Education, that they have generously made available for free. So do go on the website and have a look at those resources, along with other wellbeing resources from around the world. And on this same website, you will find a list of upcoming What Works X webinars. And these webinars happen every Monday and Thursday at 4 o'clock. And just before we go, I'd like to say thank you so much to everybody that has been on the call today. I just realized I had not put that. Yes. So thank you very much for everyone that's been on the call today. Look, none of us chose COVID, but I know we're all doing our best to keep the positives going. I'm certain and hopeful that this time will pass and we will come out of this stronger, kinder, and more purposeful. So from my home to yours, stay safe, everyone, and heartfelt thanks from all of us at KHDA. Thank you, Ramadan Kareem, once again, and goodbye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Nada.